Hello, and welcome to the Wade Borth podcast. I'm your host, Wade Borth, and in every episode, my goal is to get you to think differently about how money works and ultimately to empower you to take control of your money and your personal financing system. Welcome to the Wade Borth podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me today, author and one of my great friends, Mary Jo Irmen. Thanks, Mary Jo, for joining me.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always so much fun. You and I can talk about many things for many hours. So we're going to try to keep this short and sweet and to the point because you and I have a tendency to have long conversations about many things. But today, I really want to talk about just infinite banking concept, how you came to it, how you and I, our thought process is in such alignment, and how we think about the IBC process just in general. And I know that's probably a tough subject, very broad subject. I just want to talk about what it means to people. And because I've had clients and I've had agents that think they know what IBC is, and it's something completely, a lot of times very different than what they think. So I just want to touch on from the agent standpoint and just from a personal standpoint on what it means to you and how it's affected your life and what advantages do you see for clients and for people that want to get to know more about IBC. So if you're good with that, we can maybe just start at the beginning, if you don't mind. Just tell the folks a little bit about who you are and how you came to IBC.
Okay, I am totally good with that. So I learned about, obviously you just told people who I was, but I also live in North Dakota with Wade. And so I live in the same state as Wade, not with Wade. Yes, he has his own wife. I refer to myself as his work wife, even though we are not in the same city even.
We're 200 miles away.
Yeah, yeah. And Wade's wife is a good sport about it. So I accidentally came onto IBC. I had always been reading stuff about the market. I didn't trust the market. I didn't like the market. I was a big Robert Kiyosaki fan. And so I accidentally stumbled into IBC because somebody was looking for a administrative assistant in life insurance. And I said, no, thanks. Don't like life insurance. Don't want to do anything. But I'm going to come listen to what you have to say because I'm always curious. And long story short, heard about it, was in awe, did not understand the life insurance side of it. And so I was a little different than most. Most of our clients come in and they go to the back half of Nelson's book and they talk about rates of return and they want to see all the numbers. And I didn't understand the numbers, but I understood the first half of Nelson's book. And I was so aligned with his thought process that I'm like, I don't get it, but I like this guy and I like what he has to say, especially within the first, I think it's like page 2 of Nelson's book. He talks about taking all the wealth in the world and redistributing it and how it would end up all back in the same hands within 2 to 3 years. My family had talked about that for years and years. My uncle had said, if we take all the money in the world and divide it equally, it's all going to end up in the same hands again. And so when I seen that, I was like, oh my gosh, that is exactly what my family is talking about. This guy has something. I don't get the numbers, but I get this. And then when the numbers were explained and life insurance in general and how that kind of work was explained, I was like, oh. And then from there, it just took me to, I think there's a lot of people out there that read Robert Kiyosaki and end up where I was. Okay, that's great, Robert. That's fantastic. But how do I get there punching a clock, making X amount per hour, and trying to convince your spouse to be a money pincher so you can go buy those properties and create that cash flow? And so what I really like about infinite banking is it changes your thought process about how to use the money so that you can have the money to buy the properties, to buy the ATM machines, to buy land, to buy storage units, to whatever it is you want to do to create cash flow. But in the infinite banking world, we talk more about cash flow and how to use the money to create cash flow than we do use the money, put it in savings, get some rate of return because that's hogwash, and then hopefully you have money to retire.
I think you're right. I was with you in the same sense when I read, Rich Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. It was like, that's the end result. That's where you want to be. But it was like, how do you get from where, again, I was introduced to this over 15 years ago, but it's the same thought process. Like, how do I get from where I'm at to what he's talking about without, and there was that gap missing in the middle. Like, how do I finance this? How do I do that without going and living in a cardboard box? That was the thought process.
Yep. And you can, if you don't have a spouse that's on the same page as you, because
Yeah.
both of our spouses are not page as us. They get it. They
Yeah.
totally understand it, but they are not thinking and talking about money nonstop like you and I.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You have to have the spouse come along and have that understanding.
Mhm.
And that's what's kind of funny is like the first think tank I ever went to, I think there was probably 15 of us in this room. And we were having this discussion about IBC, and I was so excited. I'm like, oh my God, look at this. And I read the book like twice in the airplane on the way back. And I was just like giddy. I get home and I give the book to my wife, Lynette. And I said, you got to read this. This is going to change our world. And she goes, like a dutiful wife, she goes, I'll read it. So that night she read it. I said, what do you think? What do you think? I'm all excited. She goes, I don't get it. And my heart just fell to the floor. Boom. I'm like, what do you mean you don't get it? How can you not get it? But not everybody gets Nelson's book right away.
Yeah.
And so she goes, let me read it again. So she read it again. And to her credit, she goes, I see where they're going. But I don't get, she was like you, I don't get the numbers. I said, and of course, at that time, I was pretty much the numbers guy. We have to understand the numbers to understand how this goes. What I've come to the realization with a lot of time is it's not about the numbers. It's about the way you think, and it's about the process over the product. It's about changing this conditioned thinking that we've been ground into our heads all the time. It's put your money away, let somebody else use it, and they're going to give you a little bit of that return. And so when we started changing that, it took a while. And then there's actually another book by a good friend of mine, Dwayne Brunell, that the next think tank I went to, he had written his first book and he just came out with it. And so I got to know Dwayne and read his book. I'm like, oh, that's a great book. And I had it all outlined and highlighted on the flight back. And again, I was all excited, but I'm like, I'm not going to put a dagger in my heart again, like she did with Nelson's book. And she read Dwayne's book because it was very much a different style of book. Mm-hmm. And she turns to me, I remember this like it was yesterday. She turns to me, she says, why do we have money in my 401k? I'm like, hallelujah.
The same thing happened to me. I read Nelson's book. I did not get it. Then I read Dwayne's book and I'm like, oh, why didn't he just say that? Then I went back and read Nelson's book again and it made sense. Yeah. But Nelson talks in, I don't know, what's the word? Parable stories. So. Like he has lots of stories for things and you don't know what the story means. And he very much was think about it. I don't know what to think about if you don't tell me what to think about. I'm a very simple person. Make this simple. My brain does not work like that. But this is, even you and I, we've worked together for what, 9 years?
10 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And so even when you and I started working together, we would have lots of conversations, Wade, about rates of return and what do you tell the client that asks this and what do we say to a client that asks this, and we would have those conversations and we ourselves were guilty of bringing in the rate of return. And until I had a colleague say, no, when they talk about rates of return, I tell them that they're in the wrong place because that's not what we do here. That was like the clicking moment for you and I, and we're like, you're right. We bring up the issue and the issue is not rate of return. So if you have an agent that you're working with that's talking about rates of return, the agent doesn't know anything about IBC. Yeah. And if they are an IBC practitioner, they're not a good IBC practitioner. And I hate to say that, and that sounds rude, but if you're studying IBC, you are not studying rates of return. Nelson rarely talked about it. I have never, outside of the book where he mentions it just a tiny bit, I have never been at a conference where Nelson has talked about rates of return.
No, and I think if you just look around, what you're saying is, and I pick on Wells Fargo because they're just such an easy target, but what they're doing with the banking process, they have $22 billion in properly structured life insurance. Do you think they care what the rate of return is of the policy? What they care about is what we call the external rate of return, is what are you doing with the money?
Yep. And they care about what it looks like on their balance sheet so they can go loan more money. Right.
That's my point. What they're making their huge rate of return off their loan money. They don't care what the internal rate of return of the policy is. Are they concerned about 3.25 or 3.45? They don't really care. Mm-hmm. Because when they're getting 3, 4, 5, 600% markup on their money for the use of their money, why does that again, I think the part of the problem is, and you and I've talked about this many times, is people are focused on the wrong things. we're conditioned to be consumers. And so
Mhm.
as a consumer, you're concerned about the minutia, when in all reality, we should be concerned about the bigger overall environment that we're actually working within, and
Mhm.
then decide if we want to work within that environment or not.
And
And
we need to figure out, this is society says you need to put money in your 401k and you need to save for retirement. And you, oh my gosh, congratulations to you for saving 3%. And I am sorry if your listeners are saving 3%. I'm just going to be the honest one that they don't, you're not the host, so you don't have to say it. I say it on my podcast, but you don't have to say it on yours. You are not getting anywhere at 3%. You will have maybe, and I've just recently looked at kind of the numbers with quite a few clients. Most of my clients do not contribute to a 401k, so I don't see it a lot, but most of your clients are going to have 3%. They're going to have 1, maybe 2 years of income at retirement by saving 3%. But they have been led to believe that I am going to save 3% and I'm going to get this 3% match and woohoo, kudos to me. And then I'm going to put it in a 401k and I'm going to save it.
yeah.
Society is not teaching cash flow. And that is what a lot of people are missing with infinite banking, that this is our and asset. The life insurance is nothing more than the asset to hold the money. But we have to do something with the money to create the income for retirement. We have to do something with the money to make more money. So if you do want to use the policy and borrow against it, you have a lot accumulated and it's going to be more than 3% savings.
Yeah.
And so when people say, and there's a lot of noise around IBC, Wade, that says, oh, you should put away 10% of your income. You should put away 10% of your income. And there are practitioners, probably more non-practitioners, saying, oh, 10% of your income, that's just an easy number. No, that's an easy sale. That's not an easy number. What do you want? How do you want to live at retirement? What can we do with that money to create the cash flow? So when you look at what we're doing as IBC practitioners, we're not just selling. So many people think, oh, we're just selling life insurance. Oh, we are not salesmen. We are teachers, and we're teaching them how to utilize that money. And yesterday, here's just a quick example. Yesterday, it was so funny. I met with a new client, and she's, Mary Jo, we just so much appreciate you. And I'm like, oh, thanks. And she said, you are, not only are you like helping us with the policy, but you're telling us, how can we raise our cattle differently? How can we make more money on the ranch? How can the kids start businesses? How can they have rental property? How can we create cash flow? What kind of businesses can they start? She's like, all of that is being discussed and we are not paying you for that. That's just coming with us getting a policy. But that's the concept. That's what we do.
Yeah. You know, that I think Nelson always said, if you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. Our job is to help you understand what's going on.
Yes.
And then once you understand what's going on, then you're there. That's the part. That's really, I think, the biggest hurdle, is that so many people think they know what's going on. It's like the whole 401k discussion. I know people that still contribute to 401k. I'm like, that's fine, whatever, if that's what you want to do. But the issue we have with 401ks is that we're still in that consumer mindset. So we put that money away, and then there's a lot of commercials. What's your number, right? You need $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever your number is. You remember those, you've seen those. And I'm like, hey, that's great. But they're still not addressing the issue, which is distribution and cash flow. Because what they want you to do once you get there, part of they never want the money to leave Wall Street. So let's admit to that there's a big animal out there called Wall Street that has a lot of propaganda, a lot of money spent in advertising to convince you that's the only way to grow wealth. I'll leave that for another discussion. But then they say you need to consume your 401k. If you consume the thing that's going to provide you, it's like consuming the goose that's laying the golden egg, right? Why do we want to consume that? But that's the mindset that they put us in, to think about that. So
they don't want it to leave Wall Street. I'm going to just point this out. They don't want it to leave Wall Street till you're 72. Then at which point you must take it because the government needs the taxes.
Yeah.
So we don't want it to leave Wall Street for a certain amount of time because we're going to penalize you because you're not smart enough. But then we don't want it to leave. Then we need it to leave eventually. If you die and it moves over to the kids, then you need to take it because, by goodness sake, we need to have those taxes because we keep printing money. And so somebody's got to pay for that. So it may as well be those people that have been putting it away and deferring the taxes, kicking the can down the road. It's not that you're not paying taxes. I met with a gal 2 weeks ago who read the book and was astonished that she was going to have to pay taxes at retirement. She
What?
really
Oh, really?
honestly thought, and this is the second or third time I've come across this, she really honestly thought there were no taxes at retirement
No taxes at retirement
because you're going to be in a lower tax bracket.
yeah. And is that actually true if you think about it? Kids are gone, all your deductions are gone, $1 trillion in national debt,
Inflation, tax rate changes.
Yeah,
But I
there's no
mean, she had no idea. And that there are people that think I am in retirement. There is a different tax structure for retirees. No,
that's so true.
no, there's not a different tax structure. It's the same. And this person is a business owner. She is not stupid. She's not uneducated. She has an accountant she works with on a daily basis. But the accountant is obviously saying, here, put money into an IRA to avoid taxes today, when in fact she does real estate. She has enough avoidance of taxes. We don't need to have money in an IRA. But she really thought she was not going to have to pay taxes at retirement.
Yeah. Yeah, and the tax issue is one that I think is easy to argue about. I think probably the biggest thing with, again, I didn't necessarily want to go down the IRA or 401k pathway, but I think it's a great example of the storage of money versus the use of money. I think that to me is, when I talk to clients, when I'm working with agents around the whole idea behind IBC, they're all trying to like, what's the advantage, what's the disadvantage? And I said, it has nothing to do with the policy. It has nothing to do with anything, the taxes. I said, because all that's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is, what are you doing with your money when you have the opportunity to do something with it? Not just spend it, but what are you doing with that money?
Mm-hmm.
I think the IRA and the 401k mindset is, it's taking out of my checkbook, so I don't have to be responsible for it.
But it's the difference between, you said it, use of money. IBC is about using the money. And when I was reading Robert Kiyosaki when I was 23 years old, I didn't have money to use because all that money went into a 401k.
Right.
And I obviously did not read his book more than once because I didn't quite get, don't put money in your 401k, put it in a savings account. I would think today if I went back and reread his stuff, it's probably there. I just missed it because I didn't really have anybody to guide me along that way. I did not grow up with parents that invested in the stock market. That was not their thing. They were farmers and ranchers. They were not investors. They had a business of farming and ranching. And I knew how to make money in that business. And I knew that there was this thing called cash flow, but I didn't know how to get the money to get there. And because I didn't have anybody to teach me. Now, some of us, like me, who are very simple, need that coach. And that's how we started working together. Is I was on my own at that point, and I'm like, I'm a lost soul, man. Wade's been in this for years before I was. He understands it. And we talk about this all the time. You're way up here. You're like the super smart guy that uses all the big words, and I'm like the simple lady that uses all like the simple words. And so we can connect in the middle. But it took a long time for you to explain stuff to me because I was of zero knowledge and you had 20 years of experience already or 15 years of experience already in that industry, that I was just trying to absorb as much as I could and learn as much as I could because I needed a teacher and I didn't have another teacher.
No. Do you remember our first meeting?
Yes, a napkin with grain bins.
I wish I would. I think if I look hard enough at my IBC books, which I just actually moved, I'm gonna have to go back and look through those. I might still have that napkin, but I don't remember.
I don't know if I took it or not. All I remember is because I wanted so badly to work with farmers, and everybody was telling me farmers don't have any money. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, they don't have any. They have money. They just don't use it correctly. They're in this banking system and they're so wrapped up in the banking system. We got to change that. And nobody understood farmers because we were at that time, prior to working with you, I was working with people from a big city who didn't know, they don't even know where their food comes from, much less anything about farming. And so it was fun to see you like, yeah, we can use that for farmers. And you're drawing out stuff and talking the lingo about farming. So it was fun.
We were small scale farmers.
Yeah, but we still had, and the crazy thing is, Wade, I had already been in the industry 2 years and not even met you.
Yeah.
Because IBC at that time was already getting to the point where I think that first conference I went to, there were a couple hundred people. You started with 15 or 16. I started with a couple hundred people. And so there were a lot more people there. And IBC was really getting to the point of exposure that it had not had previously.
Yeah. That was to me, that was one of the best encounters I ever had, because it formed this relationship. And I love our back and forth. So you're like, keep it simple. And I'm like, get up to speed. And it's so fun, because you and I understand that we need each other as a whole, right? Everybody needs somebody to either if I'm not explaining it to you correctly or to a level that somebody can understand, then I'm not doing a good job. And also maybe for you, I need some technical expertise that maybe you don't have. And so partnering with somebody, finding a mentor, I consider you a mentor to me in many ways as well. You have some tremendous people skills, and you connect with people, and you can reach out to people a lot of different ways that I've never been able to think about doing. And so there's just so much we can learn from each other when we just put our egos aside and actually just open up and find ourselves a little bit vulnerable, saying, hey, I don't understand this. Help me understand.
And we work with very different clienteles. The majority of my clientele is our farmers and ranchers and blue collar people who just don't use fancy terminology. Like, I don't need a dictionary to talk to them.
Right.
If I need a dictionary to talk to you, we're probably not going to be friends. Yeah. I'm going to look at you. What would that word mean? That is just not how I grew up. But I don't talk to people, farmers and ranchers and blue collar workers, your linemen, your electricians, your welders. Those people do not have, they already don't believe in the 401k system and the IRA system. And so I just don't talk about it a lot. So a lot of times I need help with those type of investment questions. And that was your world. And you understand that world because your people, most of your clientele, doctors, and you have farmers and whatever too, but your clientele tends to have more of the punching the clock, and I'm going to get this great match and I'm going to make more money and whatever. I tend to work with people that just don't have enough money. They have the money, they're just not utilizing it correctly. But
if you're enjoying this podcast or know anyone else that might be interested, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and please leave a review. This will help this podcast reach and help more people by ranking higher in searches and ultimately help more people get out of financial bondage. And don't be afraid to share this podcast with your friends and family, as we can be easily found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.